Welcome to the Blending In podcast, where I chat with innovative educators who are integrating EdTech. I'm your host, Ashley Yazarlu, and I'm so glad you're listening in today. Today, I have invited back my very first podcast guest, Erin Carr, who is now out of the classroom as an instructional coach at Diamond Valley Middle School. I wanted to have Erin back on the show to talk about her transition from classroom teacher to instructional coach. So Erin and I actually met earlier this spring and recorded an episode, but for the first time ever, I lost the recording. I'm sorry, Erin. But welcome back, and thank you for coming back on and being willing to re-record this episode that we initially had back in the early spring.
No problem. Yeah, no problem at all.
So I think what happened was we recorded, and then my laptop started acting funky, and I went to IT and I was like, hey, I need you to fix my laptop. And they gave me a new one. And somehow between that transition, the recording just went missing out into the ether and it was nowhere to be found. But we had such a good conversation, and I really just wanted to relive it with you and make sure that our listeners, get to hear from you and your transition from classroom teacher to instructional coach. So thank you again for being back.
Of course. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah. So let's just jump right in, and I want to talk about your biggest sort of aha moment from stepping outside the four walls of your own classroom to becoming an instructional coach. And now you have this opportunity to see inside the classroom of so many other people. So what's been your biggest aha?
Actually, I think that has been my biggest aha moment. It's just been to how can we break down the walls of our classrooms for everyone? So it's not just a coach that gets that opportunity. Just how powerful it is to be able to learn from each other and also to build a culture of collaboration, where we're working together and not evaluating each other or looking at going into a classroom to see how to do something perfectly. That we really can use that idea of going around and seeing each other in our classrooms for many different purposes. That's been extremely eye-opening.
You know what? I think we both have that in common, because that was for me, stepping outside of the classroom as an instructional coach, just seeing how other people do this job was
Yes.
really eye-opening, because I might have seen an English teacher here and there over the years, but going in and being able to see a science teacher or a math teacher or even a history teacher and how they engage students in learning opened my eyes to a lot of different strategies and methods for engaging students in learning, both with technology and without technology. So just being able to see it was huge.
Yeah. Even hearing how they talk to their students, it just broadens your horizon, because you're so stuck in your own little silo all the time. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when I transitioned to being a site-based coach a few years ago, I was coming into a school site where I didn't really know anybody there, and I had to sort of cultivate some relationships with people so that they would even allow me to go into their classroom, which is a little bit different than your experience. So you were already a teacher at the site, and then you transitioned into being a coach. So how did you, or how have you gone about establishing that coaching relationship so that you can engage colleagues in these coaching activities?
There are lots of different levels to that question, because first I think it's kind of yes, I'm coming from just working with them as a colleague for a long time. But yeah, I knew I'm in a new role. I'm different than my role is different than it was before. So the way that I interact with people will have to be different too. So the first thing, this will sound kind of cheesy, but the first thing I did was to write down all the names of the people in the department that I was, as a math coach, I was like, okay, who are my math people? So I wrote down on sticky notes, like you would kind of in your classroom with a seating chart.
Yeah.
Wrote down on sticky notes everybody who was on the 6th grade team, 7th grade team, 8th grade team. And then I also had instead of a classroom map, I had the school map, and I highlighted all of their classroom numbers and had their schedules. And it took me, I still have to check that before going in with somebody, because I still make mistakes of like, okay, who's on prep at this time? Who's not, what class is this right now that I'm going to walk into, especially with teachers who teach more than just one thing. So, half the time in one of the teachers' classrooms, I will go into like an avid class or something, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot they don't teach math this period.
Yeah.
But that helped a lot. So I sort of treated it like a classroom in that way. And then everything is a relationship building opportunity, every single interaction. So it's very important to be at their team meetings, at the math team meetings. Of course, I zeroed in on math, being the math coach, going in and on people's preps and to talk with them and build those relationships as a coach, as somebody that they could trust to co-plan, just see where they were at with what they wanted to accomplish this year.
Yeah, trust is a huge part of coaching. You have to build those trusting relationships so that you have the opportunity to go in and engage them in different type of coaching activities. So when you're on a campus and you're going into classrooms, I know we focus a lot on different types of blended learning models that have been going on and in and around our district and even beyond. When I've had people on the show, we've talked about station rotation model or using playlist or flipping your classroom or using choice boards. And even somebody at your site, Danielle Adams, was on the show talking about how she's using the Modern Classroom Project blended learning model. So curious as to what blended learning models you've observed on your campus taking place and which ones have really been effective in getting students engaged to do the hard work of learning.
I'm looking at my notes too. When we first recorded this, it was more closer to the beginning of the year, closer kind of. And there was a very big push this year from teachers to get them back to working on like using paper and pencil. And so that was like from the start of the year, that's what I was hearing all of the time, to just really set those expectations. And that's definitely needed, but we can't we can't really get away from the computer that we need it to do many things. But I have seen, yes, a lot of paper pencil work, but yes, a lot of people using, I would say, more of a flipped model, if I could call it anything. It would be that blended model, but more of using it for communication purposes, using, knowing how to use Google Classroom and how to just make sure every kid has equitable access to all of their classroom materials. But that's how I would see most people using it. I don't see a lot of station rotations. Actually, there is one teacher that I did see that with, in a history teacher's classroom. So yes, a little bit of that, but I think that's for the most part, it would be that more of a flipped model, but kind of pulling away from that and knowing they needed to use the computer in conjunction with the paper and pencil.
Yeah. Blending it, right? That's the whole premise of the show, blending, right? So
exactly.
So with the traditional flipped model, when it was first kind of introduced to us as educators, it was like flip your classroom, and in other words, record yourself, allow the kids to watch that video recording at home, and then when they're back in class, you can engage with them one-on-one, answer questions, address misconceptions, those kinds of things. But we've seen a shift in even using that model because teachers were making these videos and sending them home and the kids weren't watching them at home. And so they would have to come back to school anyway and either rewatch or reteach the videos. And so teachers sort of just like embrace that like they're not going to
Mhm.
expect 100% of those students to go home and watch those videos when they have sports or working after school jobs and things like that. And so they started doing an in-class flipped model where they video record a segment of their lesson, and maybe they're allowing students to watch it in a small group while they're working one-on-one with another group, or they're having kids work in a group project, while another set of kids is watching a video of instruction. I've also seen them, like you said, using it for procedural type things, like when we get a new student in class, like here's a recording of the things that we went over at the beginning of the year when you weren't here. So like onboarding or like the instructions for a project or a task, having those posted in Google Classroom. So have you seen that as well?
Yes, and that's really like in my own teaching, that's how I used it. I thought it was extremely powerful. I will never do it another way. Anything that you're going to say 5 more times throughout the day is something that could be recorded. And I think at the very minimum, if you weren't going to use it for anything more powerful than this, like we have it's no surprise to anybody in education that their attendance is a crazy thing the last few years.
Yeah.
And kids going on independent study, and then, kids who just don't show up to school. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
getting a little bit better, but it still is a problem. And that chronic absenteeism. And for me as a teacher, just to be able to provide, still make sure that I have done whatever I could do for them, for my students in whatever situation they're in, that is very valuable to me. So, yeah, I have absolutely. I see teachers definitely doing that.
Yeah, and you mentioned making learning more equitable, and I think that's keeping in mind that equity piece of how can we engage students in learning when they're not even present. Like, what are some things that I can do as a teacher to like help give them access to the material or to me
Yes.
when they're not physically present? And video is a powerful tool that has helped us to do that as teachers.
Because you're going to be asked to provide them something anyways.
That's
So
true. That's true.
might as well just
That
cover all
is
your bases.
That is so true. That is so true. Well, okay, so that brings me to a question about challenges. So, implementing blended learning, we know it takes time to make those recordings and do those things, right? And have the extra copies and all of the things. So, what is the biggest challenge that you see with teachers when someone is trying to implement blended learning activities in the classroom? And then as a coach, like how have you helped them overcome those challenges?
Okay. Um, I think that what I see with teachers when they're trying to implement blended learning is first that blended learning, like understanding what blended learning is in the first place, that it's not just doing stuff on the computer, and it's also not flipped instruction like what you were talking about before. Because I think that yes, some people still actually and this are not clear on what the differences are between those two things. So it's really important to have clarity on those, on the strategies that you are using, so that you know why you're using it and what purpose it's serving.
Right.
Um,
Don't just use tech for tech's sake. Like there needs to be an intentional use of the
yes,
technology. Yeah.
yeah, because I think that's when you run into problems. You're like, oh, this isn't working, and so I'm going to throw out everything. I'm going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like, well, wait a second. Pieces of it are working. What is it about that piece that, well, maybe what is the challenge that you're having? And maybe it's because of, something else that you can either remove that small piece or adjust it and be able to use it more effectively. So that would be
Yeah.
the first thing. And I think that's important with everything we do as teachers, is to have clarity about it. Secondly, managing the classroom on the computer, because
Mhm.
that management of the tech can also cause us to throw out the baby with the bathwater, just to say, oh, this isn't working for me. I don't, the kids are doing this and I don't understand it. And so I'm just going to like get rid of it all. But just using all of the tools that you have access to, having GoGuardian up on the screen and knowing what GoGuardian can do, all of the different features that it has. And also knowing just any, how to correctly roll out a new software or program, or if it's an app or something like that, how to introduce it to your students. That takes a lot of time to know how to correctly manage that process.
Yeah, and the onboarding of it. I was actually just talking to a teacher last week about letting students use Canva to create. And the teacher was nervous about using it because he felt like, well, I haven't used Canva enough myself and I don't really know enough about it. I can't help kids if they're struggling. I can't teach them how to use that tool. And I just said to him, you don't have to. Like, the beauty of it is you can put it in their hands and let them figure it out and let them teach each other. Like, oh, hey, I see that you did that. Show me how you did that. And you'll watch that magic of learning happen right in front of you when you kind of release control. I mean, you know that it's going to be a student friendly, safe, district approved platform. You don't have to be an expert on it. Just give it to them and let them go. And just, you'll be so surprised at like what they create with it.
Yeah, I think you just brought up something that I was thinking about, that yeah, when rolling out a new tool, you can, or something like Cami, you can give them a class period or half of a class period to just explore it. And that allows you to walk around the room and see what they're doing. And especially if you're nervous about something. That's what I remember doing that with my, now as I've used tools, I'm pretty fluent with them. I can walk around, I can give them more directed, I can give them, more directed like questions to answer while they're exploring. But when I was first starting out, I was like, oh, okay, I will just give them this time to explore it and walk around and watch what they're doing. And that will give me a lot of information as oh, okay, I didn't need to explain to them that they could do this. And then you can stop and go up to the front of the room and, hey, did you guys know I saw so-and-so doing this feature? Did everybody see this feature? So
Yeah.
I think like being able to like let go a little bit, that's
Uh-huh.
so hard. I'm
It
actually
is.
like to know when to let go and when to pull in the reins and show them something very specific.
Yeah, I mean, our district sometimes uses the language of tight versus loose, right? Like there's things that we need to be tight on and there's things that we need to be looser on. And as like type A, teacher lesson planning personalities, we have a tendency to want to be very tight with our structure of our lessons and the questions that we're asking kids and the activities that we're asking them to do. And sometimes we can be a little too tight and not loosen those reins and give them the freedom of exploration and like self-discovery. And so I think that for me has been a challenge, is like, how do I like release a little bit of control when I want to have complete control over the learning environment? It's so hard.
Yep. Well, one thing that helps with that too is, and this will be no surprise for anybody in our district, but to know what your success criteria is for the day, you actually, in a lot of ways, not just with tech, but in a lot of ways, you can let go of control because you know what the main point of your lesson is. So you're able to, handle a lot of different things that come in, because if I hit this mark, I know I've done my job for the day. Like I've hit my
Exactly.
goal for the day.
Exactly. Clear learning intentions and success criteria for the win.
Yep.
So, okay, just thinking about shifting, right? So you were a teacher, you had a perspective about blended learning. Then you became a coach, and that perspective may have shifted a little bit. Next year, you're going into a new role. You're going to be your site's learning improvement site support specialist. And in this new role, you're going to be back in the classroom part-time, like teaching a couple class periods a day and also coaching. So what are your thoughts and feelings about blended learning and going back to teaching and then still managing coaching responsibilities and doing all that at the same kind of at the same time? I feel like it's a lot on your plate.
It is a lot because coaching full time has been a lot, and I've really tried to spend a lot of time getting my systems solid and making sure that I have things, all of the coaching systems that I've kind of like tested out this year.
Yeah.
Um, Getting those pretty solid and organized in my drive, so I'm going to know where to find them quickly because I'm going to need to be able to find things quickly. Um, but I guess now you're making me think
Well,
that
because you
a
have
lot
this
of,
like unique opportunity, like you got to
yeah,
be in the classroom, step out,
mhm,
coach, see other perspectives, and now you're
yeah,
going to go back. And I'm in the same position. I'm going back to teaching next year too. So, and
yeah,
I'll still be coaching some like part-time on the side. So I'm getting to go back too. And I already know like there's a million things in my brain that I'm like, oh, I'm going to change this and do this differently in the classroom now that I've seen XYZ on the outside. So how are
yeah.
you feeling? Like, what are you thinking about changing or doing differently?
Um, I definitely, I think blended learning actually allows you the freedom to um, restructure the way what you prioritize in teaching. Um, my priority is not going to, this is my plan. Okay.
Okay, can you tell me your plan,
Who
Erin?
knows?
What is your plan?
Who knows how this will end up working out? But my plan is to actually prioritize projects and tasks more, giving uh, a little bit more of a real world feel to things, and to then secondly weave in the skills that they will need after we have like gotten into the task a little bit and worked out what their actual needs are, um, using that formative assessment.
Mhm.
um, so and blended learning, I'm gonna record any parts of my lessons that can be recorded in short little um, chunks of things so that I can actually put that on Google Classroom and build resources for each week to go along with
Yeah.
what we'll be working on. So, but without I just love that we have access to all of these tools, because without that I would not be able to, I wouldn't feel like I had the tools to be able to rethink how I structure my classroom.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we're very fortunate here in our district that we have a chief technology officer, Ben Markley, who is all about putting effective, high quality ed tech tools in the hands of teachers so that we can have, a better, higher quality teaching and learning experience for our kids. So I'm excited about going back to teaching and being able to try some of the things that I've learned as a coach. Um, and I'm excited to continue to support teachers as well in this journey. So advice for teachers, what now that you've been able to see outside the four walls of your own classroom, like what's your biggest piece of advice that you have for them?
All right. My advice is to get outside of your four walls. So to work with your coach on your campus and ask them to go with you to go visit teachers on a prep or in an instructional walk or something, but at the very least on your prep, go see people. I wish I would have done that more in my first few years of teaching. I mean, just all throughout my career before becoming a coach. I just don't know what got in the way of that. For some reason, I didn't do it. I knew it was, I guess you kind of know it's always available to you, but you, other things take priority. And sometimes it seems a little scary. So that's why I say, like, contact your coach on your campus and go with them. Or if you're brave enough, just go. But a coach can really help, like, make it less scary and to help you reflect too. So
Yes.
yeah.
I
can look for
100% agree with you.
Sorry, you can look for something specific, or you can just go in and see what you
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seriously is the most like powerful, eye-opening thing just to be able to see other people do this job. So that's my advice too, is any opportunity that you have to go and see, just like Erin said, it is powerful. And doing it with an instructional coach right beside you makes it tenfold, better than it is if you're by yourself. So, well, thank you, Erin. Thank you for re-recording with me today. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me again.
Thank you. And no problem. It's fun.
Thanks for listening to the Blending In podcast. I hope you gleaned some inspiration to blend in EdTech into your instruction. You can find show notes and resources from today's episode on my website, blendinginpodcast.com. If you loved what you heard today, leave a review, follow the podcast on socials, and hit the subscribe button to get notified when new episodes are released. Until next time, don't hesitate to innovate and integrate.